Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Exploring AI and the Future of HR. We have a very exciting discussion planned today. And before we get started, I've just got a couple of very quick housekeeping things to go through. So first of all, this webinar is being recorded. So if you can't make it to the end, or if you'd like to share it with one of your colleagues, you'll be receiving a link to the webinar tomorrow. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. Second of all, there will be a Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. So if you stick around for that, you can fire in some questions in the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen there, and we'll get to them at the very end of the discussion. Panelists, feel free as well. If you want to answer them along the way, feel free to do so, but we will have time dedicated at the end for that. If for some reason can't get through it all, we'll be sure to answer them by email tomorrow as well. So now that that's the quick couple of things out of the way, I thought it might be time to introduce our panelists. So we've got a really great panel lined up today. I'll start with you today, Jeff. Could you just give us a few words about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Jeff Welstead. I'm the founder and CEO of Big Bear Partners. That's an HR consultancy. Primarily started here in the UK. I've been here for about 20 years as an American living just outside London. My focus, for the most part, has been working now with 16 different kind of fast growth tech and biotech companies to kind of build HR capability and people strategy from sort of the ground up, as they were kind of sat with a bunch of investment and then needed to kind of go big fast. But I now kind of also focus on AI and HR tools and how best to use it, and how organizations and HR functions basically can raise their strategic relevance with the use of it.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. We'll move along to you, Max. Thanks for joining us. And can you give us a
lovely to be here. Thank you, Justin. Yes. So I'm Max Bloomberg. Lovely to be here. My background is I am actually a computer scientist originally. And I had a tech startup, which I IPO'd many years ago. And then got waylaid by organizational psychology and people analytics, which I've been doing for the last 10 or 15 years. And I was just amazed when AI came back into the loop, because I could go back to my roots. And I tend to work with fairly large organizations, so it's quite fun implementing AI in HR and various parts of the organization. So a topic like this just wasn't to be missed.
Awesome. Yep, and we're glad you took the invitation. And finally, Lital, can you give us a few words about yourself, please?
Sure. So nice to meet you all. I'm Lital. I'm coming from the talent acquisition angle. So I'm in recruitment in the last 20 years. Worked in Google, Facebook, and WhatsApp in tech hiring. And in the last 2 years, I founded Heart Mind Talent, and we work with startups at initial stages that still don't have people operation on the ground or recruitment on the ground, and we are coming as embedded recruitment team and supporting them with their hiring needs.
Thank you all very much for those introductions. Audience as well, I'll be sharing credentials for all of our panelists as well in tomorrow's email, so if you want to get in contact with any of them, I'll be sharing that as well. So just before we get started, I wanted to mention at the top that we do have a few polls today. So the polls, they'll be coming throughout today's discussion. So I encourage you all to get involved. And speaking of which, I'm going to launch our first one of 3 today, which should be appearing on your screen right now. And the question is, how extensive is AI used in your HR practices? We've got a few different options here: not at all, minimally, moderately, or extensively. Obviously unsure as well if you're not too sure yourself. Question here is basically just to get a bit of an understanding of where you're all at with your understanding of AI, and how well integrated it is into your process at the moment. Hopefully we can provide some tips and insights throughout today's discussion to help you there. Plenty of votes coming through, but it's still only just over half of you. So if you're only listening in, drop in a vote, and I will end the poll very shortly and share those results. Looks like that's it. So one more. Okay, ending the poll. Sharing the results on your screen, which should be there right now. Top vote getter was 36% with minimally. We're exploring AI options or have implemented very basic AI tools. We also got 30% for moderately, 24% for not at all, and 9% for extensively. So a very big mixed bag of answers there, which is good to hear. So let's get stuck into our planned discussion for today, and I'm gonna start with you, Max, today for the first question here, talking about misconceptions. So, what are some misconceptions about AI's role in HR that you encounter, and how do you address them?
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, I think AI seems to be relatively new to most people, although it's been around for 50, 60, even longer years. But because it's in the public eye and it's coming quickly, it's also quite a threatening thing for many people, because there's all this talk about it potentially taking away jobs. So I've just got three misconceptions, and I'm sure that there are many others. The first one is that AI is somehow objective and unbiased. Well, AI works by having a lot of training data, and it's told, this is a cat, and this is not a cat, or this is a dog. And after it's seen a few 100,000 of those, it learns to say this is a cat. Now, whether there's bias or not, I can give you a great example of bias. If I show it a picture of Siamese cats, and only Siamese cats and not any other types of cats, it's going to be biased towards only recognizing Siamese cats. And so that kind of shows you that the data that we use to train an AI is what gives the bias. In fact, in life in general, it's impossible not to have bias, because what you think is a good HR person may not be what somebody else thinks is a good HR person. Now, you may both be right, but you are biased in your view from your life experience and education, and they are biased in their view from their life experience and education. So the idea of no bias at all is absolutely impossible in this life. The other example I say is that if we had a capitalist and a socialist trained AI, they would give different answers. One wouldn't be right, one wouldn't be other. So with bias, it's more a question of you should be aware of the bias in your AI rather than trying to get rid of it, because we are only human because we have got bias. That's what makes us different to machines, is that we do have bias. And so there's no such thing as bias free. The other thing is that the idea that AI will replace human jobs. Okay, so the way I think about it is in something like strategic planning, where you're setting a set of business objectives. When you define business objectives, like what market share you want, the key word is want. You see, AI doesn't want anything. It's programmed by a human being who says we want 64%. But the AI has got no intrinsic desire to have it. Therefore, there'll always have to be somebody programming the AI. So whereas AI cannot do planning unless it does the data, the human being has got the desire or the motivation. The machine has got no motivation to create a business plan. So although it can help provide the data for the planning, human beings will always do the planning. And there's a tip for you. Always try and move into jobs where AI is unlikely to catch up. So for example, in emotional interaction, I'm not saying they'll never catch up, but it's going to take a while. And planning, it'll take a while before AI gets very good at that. And then finally, this idea that AI is something brand new, I touched on that a little earlier. AI has been around for so many years, and in fact, we've been using AI in organizations, predictive analytics, statistical regression for the statistically minded amongst you. All of these techniques have been around forever, and so there's no real difference other than there's a good marketing difference. What I can say is that the difference that AI gives is much larger data sets and much faster than anything we had before. But conceptually, I think there's not a huge difference in what we've had for the last 40 years compared to today, other than speed and size. So those are three misconceptions I think that are important.
Much appreciated, much appreciated. I think misconceptions can easily be tied to the word fears as well with a lot of people. We've talked about this in previous webinars, where the fear of AI and how it's going to affect our jobs and future of work and these sorts of things. So very well put. Thanks for the insights there, Max. Usually we have our polls a little bit more spread out, but we do have one that's going to shape our next question here. So I'm going to launch the second poll on our screen here, which is talking about challenges. And this will preface our next question. We've got plans here, and it will be appearing on your screen right now. The question is, what do you see as the biggest challenge in integrating AI into HR functions? I'll read those responses out here. Lack of understanding of AI capabilities and potential benefits, concerns about data privacy and security, difficulty in choosing the right AI tools and technologies, resistance to change from the workforce, cost of implementation and maintenance. And I can see there's actually plenty of you who've joined in late. So if you've just joined in late, thank you very much for finding the time to join us. And plenty of votes rolling through as well. We'll do our best as well to share these following the webinar. Yeah, half of you so far. I'll let it roll a little bit longer, and then we'll jump into our next question. Okay. Trying to get to the 60%, 70% mark of you. There we go. Okay, going to end the poll right here. Thank you for the responses. Sharing the results on your screen, which should be appearing right now. Yes, so what do you see as the biggest challenge in integrating AI into HR functions? 38% of you voted lack of understanding of AI capabilities and potential benefits. Another big chunk were 30% of you concerns about data privacy and security, but we also got votes for resistance to change from the workforce, difficulty in choosing the right AI tools and technologies. Cost of implementation maintenance, interestingly had 0 votes there. So thank you for those responses. And I'll just close the poll right there. I'm going to go to you next, Lital, as well. So as we're talking about challenges in AI and implementing AI, so what are some of the biggest challenges that HR departments face in implementing AI, particularly in the areas of recruitment and, say, employee development?
Yeah, I can say from my experience as a recruiter or recruiter lead, AI it's a scary word for people that are not coming from computer science background. It's a scary word. It's you sometimes feel, oh my God, like I wouldn't know how to deal with that. Even when ChatGPT went, a lot of people, it took people from my colleagues, it took them time to use the ChatGPT because it looks like it's such a technical aspect. But once you are starting to use the tools of AI, you can understand how it's impacts your daily routine. So as recruiters, we have a lot of tasks that we are doing repeatedly, screening CVs, screenings for candidates, online, speaking with candidates, putting notes of the interview. And those tasks, you can use AI and it can save you so much time. I can say that from my experience, I recently, in the last year, I started to use AI tool for my interviews notes. And it helped me massively in saving time. And I don't need to, I used to spend 20 minutes after the interview to rewrite my notes. Now it's kind of, I get it in a bullet points. Also, while you are interviewing a person, you are really focusing on the person that you speak with, and you don't need to kind of write the notes or cut the conversation in the middle. So I think it's the education piece is so important, and the kind of opportunity to give opportunity to people just to use the tools, that they will understand that it's not only for technical people. You can use it and it can really improve your daily productivity. So I think that is kind of the main aspect from my side. I also heard a lot of recruiters saying, hey, like AI will replace us in the future. I came across also a tool that it's an AI bot that is interviewing you, and it's hard for you to recognize if it's a real interviewer or an AI tool. So I think it's an interesting. I think that definitely in the future we will see more and more AI tools coming into recruitment and helping us in the most challenging role of finding those super talented people for the teams. And it will be super interesting to see how we will adapt those tools. So yeah, I'm also in kind of constantly thinking, yeah, it's amazing if I will have like an AI interviewer that will take over the first interviews and will save me so much time. But then I'm getting to a point that I'm saying, hey, but like it's super important to the clients that I'm working with that I will give my personal inputs on the candidate, and I'm not sure how the AI tool will be able to do it. So I think that we are still in this stage that we are kind of searching, making better understanding of what tool can help us and how we can use it. But definitely we should continue to keep up with the development and adjust tools that can help us.
Yeah, for sure. I can speak from personal experience in marketing, and it was a bit of misunderstanding or fear of what it, what it actually does, how to use it, these sorts of things. And now, like, fast forward a years, I'm so ingrained with using AI daily. Basically, it's about sort of taking the leap with understanding in the first place. I think a lot of people face that challenge. So thank you, Lital, for that. Jeff, what about from your perspective, looking at sort of broader HR functions, employee development, these sorts of areas? What's your take here?
Yeah, thanks very much, Justin. So, I mean, first of all, I guess this notion of the fact that AI is just suddenly everywhere, right? It just becomes sort of ubiquitous, and everybody's kind of like talking about it from 30 to 100,000 feet all the way down to very, very hyper-specific applications. And it feels like it's possibly just too much information to absorb. So I think basically, what I would definitely encourage people to do is to kind of engage with free and open training frameworks like LinkedIn Learning and all these sorts of things, and just basically learn, the kind of core tenets of this. Look, AI isn't complicated to use because of the natural language processing capability, right? We basically taught this really complex machine to kind of understand our kind of common everyday language. What is, though, important to learn about is sort of this notion of prompt engineering, right? The ability to kind of be extraordinarily clear on what it is you want the computer to do. Don't have to be rude about it, but you can certainly kind of say, hey, listen, this is specifically what it is I'm looking for. Here's the role I want you to play. And basically, this is kind of the outcome I'm looking for delivered in this particular manner. And you'll be shocked. I mean, it's really quite fascinating. The use of AI in HR, however, does kind of present some interesting challenges, around things like what will very soon become fairly ample AI regulation, right? The EU's already passed a bill. The US has passed one. I think Australia's, on that, whereby people are being extraordinarily specific to say, look, do not use this stuff for malicious terms. Be extraordinarily careful with personal data. Be careful not to be manipulating people in any way, shape, or form in such a way. Some of the stuff gets difficult to kind of figure out like how to manage and so forth. So look, it's going to likely be down to HR vendors to kind of lift and shift and own this problem, but to also be able to explain it to you, because things like audits and all these kinds of things will likely come along too. So yeah, similar to GDPR and data protection, there's probably a lot of reticence around that. But look, again, you can get very clever about this. And there are all sorts of interesting new tools popping up left, right, and center to help you kind of manage that process as well. And the other thing is, kind of like to Lital's point with regard to the use of bots and so forth and a variety of different things. Absolutely right. I mean, this can save us loads and loads of time. But having said that, we never want to lose sight of the fact that we want a really powerful, positive human touch interaction. And we don't want the bots basically to try to take that away and possibly mess it up and possibly expose the fact that we're using bots to do this. Very, very interesting. And I'll leave it on this. Very interesting kind of notification I got from Glassdoor. I kind of like, subscribed to the chat in the back room, and a gentleman basically said, this is really creepy, but my son was hired by a bot and never spoke to a human being at Amazon. He was there in the job for like 8 months and was fired by a bot and never spoke to a human being and was just told, that's it, you're done, leave pass at the door. So yeah, these weird things are starting to come, but yeah, hopefully we can insert ourselves where it matters.
It's interesting we ended it there, because we're moving forward right along talking about human intuition and AI decision making. So it's interesting you made the point there about the Amazon experience, basically. But Jeff, I'll stay with you here. So how do you see, in your experience, the balance between human intuition and AI decision making evolving in HR practices?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, Justin, and something we're always ever worried about. Look, I mean, the thing is, and I'm pretty certain that Max will probably back this up as well, AI is not a panacea at this point. It does not answer all things. It is not, some kind of god of all knowledge and so forth. It literally reacts to what it's been trained to do. And it does its best, right, to kind of like create a predictive model that says, look, these words typically go together based on me scraping the internet and coming back to you with what it is I'm seeing. Having said that, the way it's presented sometimes does sound very authoritarian, very authentic, very very real. So be careful, right? You always ever want to kind of like read between the lines and make sure the stuff that it is coming back is really, in fact, quite truthful and useful. And it's usually the contextual challenge that is the human touch. Don't forget, the best, most powerful supercomputer in the world is between your ears, right? Its ability to process information contextually using past referential material, forward-looking intuition, all sorts of fascinating, looks and feels. AI is basically there to be an inspiration. It's there to be sort of a co-pilot, just to kind of maybe loosen some of your thinking, maybe to wake you up to some stuff that, you forgot about, that kind of a thing. And maybe to help you structure, some of the information. But that's kind of where I see the interface at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Max, what's your take on this point here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one, because it depends what we mean by intuition to start with. For me, intuition and creativity, now we really get deep, are about joining up information that hasn't previously been joined. So I'm of the school that says there's no ghost in the human machine. Some people are really good at synthesizing information from unusual spots. So Beethoven, when he was writing Beethoven's Fifth, his genius in creativity was finding a connection between patterns of notes, and Einstein between patterns in the universe. So we can do that. However, if you've trained an AI, a Gen AI, for example, with all this information, and then you start, and now it's got everything, and you say, start finding random connections between everything in engineering and everything in music or in art, it's going to come up with stuff that we're going to say, wow, that's really creative. And in fact, that's one way, and intuitive. And that's one way that I do use AI. So I did some work at an insurance company who said, Max, can you come up with ideas for AI apps to help us move forward in the market? And the way I approach things like that now is I say, you are a Picasso, you're an artist. You bring your art domain. You've been asked to use your art skills in the insurance industry, the specialist insurance industry it was. How would you do it? And it comes up with an amazing list that you would not have thought of. Then you say, right, you are an engineer, you are a doctor, you are blah, 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 blah. And slowly it came up with a list. And they said to me, Max, you are so clever, for coming up with this list. And, it wasn't. It's just that now imagine that AI is much faster and it's truly trained on all the information in the universe, or the Akashic record, as they might call it in Eastern philosophy. You're going to have a machine that's very, like Lital was saying earlier, you're going to have a machine that's very difficult to differentiate from a human being, playing the Turing test. So I'm not so sure that we're not going to see this. It might be, whenever I say 30 years, you should probably read 10 years. But I reckon we'll see this in around 7 or 8 years. Amazing creativity and intuition.
Yeah, I saw an interesting prediction the other day when they were talking about maybe, artificial general intelligence actually being somewhat indiscernible from human intelligence, being now 5 years. And I was like, whoa, okay.
It's around the corner, there's no question. So your earlier point really about that the human has to be in charge. Well, the human can be in charge to the extent that we've got the switch to turn the thing on and off. But it's rapidly getting to the point where it's got far more information available to its neurons than we do. And if it were in charge and you said, go nuts and just start making maybe all the stars would just turn off once it's made every possible connection and the universe would implode. We don't know. But I think we're moving towards that kind of singularity faster than people suspect. That's
Agreed.
My feeling.
Agreed.
But celebrate it until then, folks.
Enjoy yourself.
While there's still time. Okay, all right. Thank you very much, both of you, for those answers there. Moving along, Lita, I'm gonna come back to you now. We're talking about organizational culture. So the question here is, can you discuss the importance of organizational culture in the successful adoption of AI within HR functions?
Yeah. I think we should look at that as every change, right? It comes from the leadership, the way that I see it. You can't just drop a tool or drop a change in the organization, and if there is no leadership supporting that change, so I work now with quite a few organizations, and you can really see that in the end of the day, the culture and the way that people behave on a daily basis is really correlated with the way that their leaders believe and the values of the leaders. So I think that it should definitely come from the leaders and what the leaders can bring to the table, and that is how basically they can make the change. I can see it also in myself. Like I have a small team that is working with me. Like it's a lot around like the motivation that you bring to the table, and then the people that are working with you in the team will follow that kind of vibes and energy. So I think it's the same here. It's a lot of responsibility, obviously. Like it comes from the employees and what they bring, but if the leadership is not on board and not supporting that change or that new tool, it will be super hard to implement in the organization. So I think there is quite a lot of responsibilities on the leaders of the organization to bring those changes
Top down
to the table. Yeah 100%.
Yep. And Max, what's your take here on organizational culture?
Well, I mean, I'm 200% behind what Lital says. To the extent, actually, Lital, that if somebody comes to me with a really cool any project, AI, people analytics, etc., I insist on interviewing the CEO at some point before I do the contract, because if the CEO isn't behind the project, I don't get a nice. Always happy to take the funds that come, but there's no case study, and afterwards the reputation suffers. So to the extent that, and AI is just another project. I work with somebody who's a specialist in transformation. So often in these projects, and I'll give you an example on the last one, the insurer that I mentioned earlier, is the culture wasn't right for it, but they really wanted. The culture was dead right amongst the actuaries, who were dead keen for it because they saw the value, but the rest of them weren't. And so I got a colleague involved who specializes in large company transformations. And my part of the project is sometimes 6 months or 3 months. His part of the project, I brought him in. He's got the 2-year, the big one. Yep. Mine is actually the easy bite once he's prepared the ground for it. So I think that's 100%. Also, when it comes to AI, it's about accepting the role of data and evidence in organizations. And if you don't have an organization that respects evidence, it's not good. I like to quote Tom Marsden, who used to head up something at Manpower at one point. And Tom made the most brilliant comment. He says, Max, data should always be one voice at the table. It shouldn't be all the voices at the table, and it definitely shouldn't be absent from the table, but it must be a voice at the table. To speak to Jeff's point earlier, that a human being needs to make the decision, but that decision is made by 4 other human beings, input from 4 people, and 1/5 of that comes from data, because 9 times out of 10, executive teams don't do what the data tells them to do anyway. You can put it right in front of them, from a recruitment perspective. You could say, here's the perfect candidate. I've profiled perfectly what a high performer looks like in your organization, benchmarked it, etc. And they'll say, no, I prefer Lital's cousin. And that's it. It doesn't matter what the data tells.
Here comes the bias.
Right, and there's the bias, you see. And so it's about respecting evidence, but not automatically assuming that the AI will make the decision, and nor should it in a world run by humans. If that world changes, then we'll have another conversation.
Great point.
Jeff, do you want to add anything here, or moving on?
No, I think they've nailed it. Absolutely, both these guys.
Yep, awesome. Very interesting. I I did have a follow-up question, but I think we better move along because I can see some Q&A there. I feel like we can stay on each question for half an hour at a time, but I will move forward. So this question here is for you, Max, as well, talking about introducing the topic of learning and development. We've got a couple of questions actually planned about this here. So what are some effective strategies for using AI to foster a culture of continuous learning and development?
Well, I mean, as far as using AI to do it, there's all the stuff that you would undoubtedly expect. And I think, Jeff and Lital will have views on this. But it's about creating content that completely serves the individual, that serves their style, that serves their level, that serves their tone. There's all that kind of good stuff. We've got more opportunities to use learning and development than we've ever had before. And I think the world is moving in a direction, especially with Gen Z, who hate being labeled Gen Z. So I'll do it just to be irritating. But to say that they don't put up with the nonsense from employers like earlier generations used to. And they demand, that you help me with my personal development. So at the moment, every penny and every cent that we spend on development in employees is towards the goal of improving their productivity to improve profits for the shareholders. There's no question. If you put in a counseling line because there's been a disaster, that counseling line isn't because you've got a big heart. It's because you need to keep the employees productive so that they keep making profits, etc. But what we're now hearing is that Gen Z are saying, but to keep me at this company, you need to help me with, in psychology terms, self-actualization, things sort of Maslow or one of those. And you will need to say, right, instead of giving the shareholders 35% return on their return on investor capital, you need to maybe give them 30%, and you need to give us 5%, and maybe 5% for sustainability, etc., by the way. But those days of where everything is dictated by the shareholder is not going to be there. And I think a lot will go to the employees, and a lot of that will take the form of development, learning and development. And I think that learning and development is going to be so well enabled by AI in ways that even the company might like, because it'll be cheap and cheerful. So they may not have to take 5% out of the shareholder. They may be able to do it with 2%, which will probably make them very happy.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about it like before. I want to bring it back to you, Jeff, as well, but we talk about it as well in some of these discussions, talking about the impact on employee retention in terms of the learning and development culture and sort of activities there, because if you're talking about returning on profit of this 30% or 35%, and you factor in the cost of losing employees as well, it's just as important from that perspective. So very interesting. And Jeff, what's your take here?
Well, it's interesting because I remember that I just now recall that the title of this webinar was around skills ontology, right? And of course, it's a big old fancy term that sounds like an academic came up with it, and probably they did. It's just this notion of, well, how do you get to a point that Max was just describing, whereby we can offer, highly personalized learning paths, and importantly, kind of notions like adaptive learning, that basically follows your performance related to particular skills and capabilities, and then basically continuously suggests things, nudges you in the direction of continuously improving in certain areas. This notion of having like an AI-powered, kind of coach or a feedback mechanism, that you can kind of reach out to and say, hey, this just happened to me, or I'm struggling with this concept and topic, or whatever the case. Can you offer some advice? That's available to you now on GPT, to be honest with you. The ability to curate and automate, kind of like really deep, powerful content, for the organization, and not just kind of like create a one-size-fits-all for everybody, because that typically doesn't end well. And people feel like they're being, as they call them in Texas, sheep dipped. Basically over and over again, and that's
branded.
Yeah, or branded, even worse, right? Exactly. So, I mean, that's, to Max's point, AI is great for this stuff because you basically are feeding it a load of complex detail, and in this particular case, you're feeding it the skills that somebody should have at particular proficiency levels within a particular role. Then you're comparing and contrasting an individual who, through some kind of a validation process, has proven that they've got particular skills at certain proficiency levels, but possibly are missing some relative to that role model. And you get some kind of a radar map or spider map, I've heard it called. And you can see and compare and contrast, where those elements are. Well, that's a great spot for AI to pick up and say, hey, I got solutions for that. Here you go. Here's basically a development plan now for the rest of the year. We'll put all the kind of training in. That's going to be really perfect because we've pre-trained our model basically to connect to those kinds of training elements. And again, I will act as your personal monitor, me being the AI, to kind of help you through this and just, see where you are. And then, of course, administratively, what's really fascinating is the analytics. I'm sure Max will get into this a little bit later, but the analytics, not just on an individual basis, but to be able to kind of extrapolate across entire departments, entire divisions, entire geographies, entire, skill sets, and be able to take a look at who knows what about what. That can really suddenly get you very quickly into strategic planning and workforce management, and maybe even some powerful commercial decisions about what direction a company goes based on the talent it has in-house already, or needs. Therefore, we need to acquire X, Y, and Z, in order to kind of beef ourselves up. So, yeah, this is a huge, huge space for AI to play.
I can add that I think that also in terms of kind of adoption of the development plan, if a AI tool is approaching and telling you this is the real data, you need to develop X, Y, Z in order to get to the next level. I think that as an employee, the chances that you will join this journey and will take all the courses or everything that you need to do are higher than a human being, a manager. I don't know the relationship that you had with this person before is telling you what you need to do. I think that the chances that that employee will take it and will put the effort are higher.
Yeah,
that's so. You remind me if I'm doing executive coaching, and I don't do very much coaching, but even with senior people, I get them on ChatGPT or Claude more recently, Claude 3 Opus, because it's better. I get them to create a career development conversation on Opus, and I've actually got the prompt. I'm always happy to share the prompt, but it varies. To say, I am this, and you put in your bio and you put in your resume, etc. You put in the XYZ. I love the Z coming from you two there. You put in the XYZs, and you say, this is my thing, this is my aspiration in life. You can put in, I'm married with kids if you want. You can put in, the more you put in, the better. These are the goals, these are the objectives that I want. Come up with a tentative plan for me to approve in the form of a timeline or a project, and it'll do that. And every time we meet, I say, can you please update with your latest prompt to tell me where you are with these things, and exactly to Lital's point, to say, update the plan, to say, where are we now? And, it keeps them, to Justin's point from earlier, it keeps them so focused because they love the idea that an AI is doing it rather than if I ask them to do it, there's no chance that I'll necessarily get an update. But when the AI asks them to do it, they do. Why? Because they've got ownership of the prompts. They are doing the prompts. They don't have ownership of me in the same way. So it's a very, very psychologically powerful tool, to the points that you both made there.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yep,
very much so. Thank you everyone there. Quick reminder here, guys, everyone listening in, both on LinkedIn and Zoom, that we approaching towards the end of the planned discussion, but there is time. We will be having Q&A at the end. There's a few questions coming through in comments. I'm very appreciative of everyone dropping them in there. We'll do our best to get through all of them. But what I will do now is launch our third and final poll for today's webinar, which is on the topic of reskilling and upskilling. I'm launching it now, so it should appear on your screen. Question is, what do you see as the biggest challenge in leveraging AI for reskilling and upskilling efforts? We've got a few different options here. Identifying the most relevant skills and competencies to develop, customizing content to meet individual learner needs, integrating AI tools with existing L&D infrastructure, measuring the effectiveness and ROI of AI-powered learning programs, or ensuring equal access to AI-enabled learning resources across the organization. Now, you might be wondering why I'm reading out the responses. It's because Zoom on the recording doesn't show the poll on the screen. So for those who watch the recording, they're like, what are the responses? So just so for everyone who watches this on the recording. And there's plenty of votes coming through, but it's about half of you. So please drop us in a vote if you're just listening in on your lunch break or something like that. And I will end the poll very shortly. Okay. I'll end it now and share the results. I just want to be sure I've got the correct vote. Yes, 31% of you voted customizing content to meet individual learner needs. We also got votes for measuring the effectiveness and ROI of AI, and 20% identifying the most relevant skills and competencies to develop. But we got votes actually for everything here as well. So that is very interesting. And thank you for your input there for our last poll of the webinar. So we are at our second to last question here before we jump into the QA. And this one's just for you, Jeff, speaking on the poll and talking about reskilling and upskilling. So how can AI tools be leveraged in reskilling and upskilling initiatives to support workforce development across the entire organization?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Look, I mean, there are loads of applications, of course, out there that can help with that. There's loads of training sources, free training sources, I might add, in a number of cases. Things like LinkedIn Learning, things like MIT Sloan, or Harvard, or Google, or IBM, you name it. I mean, there's just loads of wonderful, good stuff out there just to kind of get you trained up. There are also lots of interesting specialty, training. There's a group in the Netherlands called AI HR that offers, kind of wonderful, very affordable packages, for HR teams to kind of get upskilled in areas like digital HR 2.0, people analytics and things of that nature. There are also wonderful sources like the three of us. We'd be more than happy to come and chat with your teams about it and do some, kind of personalized and customized approaches based on where it is you want to aim your thing. But look, here's the thing. Max kind of already talked about this. GPT, I mean, there's the large language models out there are incredible. Claude 3 is phenomenal, and that is arguably one of the later ones. The Opus version is really, really phenomenal. Even Gemini, frankly, and Google's Gemini is also phenomenal. You can ask it a bunch of stuff. You can basically say, listen, where is it I need to start? We're starting at a very low bar. We ultimately want to go from here to here to here to here. This is, talk to the computer, believe it or not, and it will start to feed you suggestions and keep that conversation going, hone it to the point where you start to get some really specific and powerful answers. And it will give you a fantastic indication of what direction of travel you probably want to go. And it will even, if you ask it, say, here are relevant links. So ask it for relevant links of tools and consultancies or wherever you think it is, or just any kinds of learning whatsoever, articles in particular, because articles typically have embedded other wonderful things that you can kind of get into. But give me the links as well, and then give it to me in a table, really simple 4-column table. And this column do this column this, and you would be like shocked at how wonderfully presented it comes back to you. Basically giving your upskilling and reskilling plan almost overnight. And then you do things like Max does, he did with us. He shared a couple of his more complex prompts, which are just hyper specific and really well honed, kind of a set of instructions for do lots of predictive messaging and then bring it home.
We lost you just for a very brief moment there, Jeff. So if you just repeat that last point.
Yes, so I'm just sorry about that. I was just saying basically that, but yeah, use these prompts to basically go and kind of get an indication of as to where you probably need to go. And again, it's not going to be perfect, but it sure will give you a brilliant steer and get you going in the right direction. And it can reference all sorts of different tangential or adjacent, kind of thoughts and concepts and ideas. Just keep the conversation going with it. And you will be amazed at what it can give you. But there's a lot of wonderful information out there. Please don't put your head in the sand. Dive in. It's a lot of fun.
Yep. Well put. Thanks for that, Jeff. All right, let's jump to our
Can I
final
just
question.
add one comment on that, Justin?
Go for it, Mac. Yep, absolutely.
Just to echo something, just to extend, shall I say, one of Jeff's points is AI won't take your job. Somebody who writes better prompts than you will take your job. So go and learn prompt engineering. Ironically, you could ask AI to teach you, but there are infinitely many courses on Udemy and Coursera or Udacity or whatever your poison. I don't know if there are any on LinkedIn Learning yet. Sure,
there are loads.
will be.
Yeah,
loads. Go and become, if you do nothing else as a result of today's webinar, become an expert on prompt engineering, because it is a tool that you can use for every other part of your career. It's the modern foundation, in my opinion.
Good news is it'll take you about an hour, to kind of learn how to do this, the kind of structure. It's honestly not painful. Just do it. It's fun.
Get good at it.
Interesting. Even more interesting that you can ask AI to teach you how to do prompt engineering. I find that quite funny that it goes the reverse way around.
The irony.
Anyway, the irony of it, it's inception of some sort, I guess. So anyway, so let's move forward. Looking at trends and outlook. I might start with you, Lital, but I would like to get everyone's thoughts on this one before we conclude. So what trends do you anticipate in the evolution of HR practices due to AI in the next 5 years?
So yeah, I think that the best that I will take it from the recruitment kind of angle, which is much closer to what I do. I definitely think that we will see interviewers that will take over at least the first stages of the interview process that AI can take over. Interviewers bots that will replace the real human in the first stages, at least. So this is definitely one angle that we already see. The other thing is that to save time. So recruiters are spending a lot of times on repeating tasks. So all the aspects of reviewing CVs. There are tools to that, but I'm sure that with the AI, we can be much more efficient. There are so many people that are applying for roles, and sometimes no one is reviewing their CV. So I'm sure that with the AI tool can help in that aspect. So this is one thing. Also the search. So the roles that we are working on currently are very niche roles, and we are spending a lot of our time just building those searches online on LinkedIn and looking for those people. And I haven't seen any AI tool that can come now and replace this specific role of kind of building the search, reaching out to people, and that will be super interesting to see what AI can bring in that aspect.
Yep, very interesting. I'll go to you, Jeff, and then we can finish with Max.
Cool. Yeah, there's going to be a heck of a lot of really interesting things happening. One is to Lital's point. Look, recruitment has led the way in terms of the utility and the utilization, I should say, of AI. There are actually some really fascinating, kind of scary tools out there, like Phenom People, like Beamery, like Fuel 50, like Eightfold, for instance, that were all kind of like throwing their weight toward solving this challenge of both internal and external marketplace, understanding what talents do we have inside, what talents do we need to go shopping for, and then great, unleash me, give me all the parameters you need, but unleash me into the market, and I will come back with, I don't know, 5, 7, strong candidates that I'll chat up and kind of engage with and see if they're willing to have a conversation with you, based on these parameters. But it's got to get loads better, right? Because as I'm sure all of us would kind of indicate, if the data isn't there, right, to go find, then quite frankly, you're only going to get as good as the data basically will kind of give you. And so that's always a challenge. But I think the use of generative AI and the use of AI algorithms in tools going right back to your core HR systems, right, that has basically always ever been a fairly placid and very static kind of a system of record, can now suddenly come to life in 3D. You can actually add really powerful analytics capabilities, to that. And instead of just finding out, what salary Julie had, 2 years ago and what's changed since, you can basically take a look at a completely fascinating myriad amount of information, comparing different demographics, comparing geographies, comparing roles, comparing all sorts of things, and say, build me a wonderful dashboard, with all these data visualizations, and keep it updated on a regular basis. Poof, done. That's the kind of stuff that AI is going to be able to do and give you just loads of powerful strategic insight. And the question is, what do you do with that information? But yeah, if you're stuck, just go ask AI.
Okay, thank you, Max. What about you? Let's sign off on this one. What's your final take?
Okay, so what can AI do in HR, if that's the question? If you look,
looking ahead, I would say is the best way.
So looking ahead, if you want to have a look at some of the processes, I published on LinkedIn a couple of months ago. It's called the Big List of HR processes, and it's got, for each recruitment, L&D, succession planning, career development, etc., etc., etc. It's got a whole bunch of interventions that you can start introducing to do. From a role perspective, job role perspective, if you're thinking about, is my job safe? What's the future going to look like on this job role? The way I've summed it up recently, and I've got an article coming out on this too in the next couple of weeks, is that if the last thing to go will be jobs requiring critical thinking, because that is probably the last area that AI is going to do. It can do creativity. So what I've done is I've lowered creativity below critical thinking. I'm now saying, maybe creativity is a mechanical task. Go to step 1 there, go to domain there, take information, put it together. So that's kind of no longer exciting that it can do that. But the one thing that distinguishes humans, I think, from AI is the ability to say, that is not right. I mean, technically, it's logical, but that's just not the right thing to do ethically, morally in this situation. So what you want to try and do is move your role towards one that requires critical thinking. That's all that universities teach, by the way, or should teach, is how to do critical thinking. Everything else you can do at a technical college or somewhere. Critical thinking. So that the future, I think all roles not involving critical thinking are going to be automated. Look at the big list and you'll get an idea of some of the things they can do. The last ones to go, maybe never, are going to be those requiring critical thinking.
Okay, thank you to the three of you for all of those responses. And there's plenty of comments and questions in here as well. As I mentioned at the top, some of these I think are in reference to some of our speakers, the publications or contact details. As I mentioned, that's going to be included in the email that will be sent tomorrow with the recording. So if you've got any of those things, I encourage you to follow our speakers on LinkedIn as well. You can find them there, but I'll be sharing links to that. We'll be sharing links to that tomorrow as well. So I'll skip through some of those. Lita, I can see that you're answering that first one there. Do you remember the name of the tool that you were talking about?
I used a few, so I'm just going to put the names here. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'll jump ahead to Sarah's question here. So do you think it is possible to completely eradicate human interaction in the HR space and move over to AI? Surely we'll always need to have the EQ human interaction in our industry. Jeff or Max or anyone, maybe let's go to Jeff. Do you want to take this one? I think this was in reference to a question earlier on about human interaction.
Look, I'm sure everybody's going to want to have to kind of like lean in on this one. There's a bunch of stuff I hate doing in HR. Administration, compliance, paperwork, kind of basic reporting, all these other kinds of things. And the great news is that you can build an AI bot basically to kind of take care of that stuff. You can task it. They're called AI agents basically, and you can kind of program, it's relatively basic, kind of actions. So you can basically things like booking your holiday and kind of finding out your holiday allowance, finding out when your last pay increase was, and doing all sorts of fascinating things. You can create this bot, fill it full of all your policies, fill it full of all your HR documents and all sorts of things, wall it off from the universe so it doesn't go leaking out anywhere. You can also go, kind of program this thing to be sympathetic to the extent that it's wanting to kind of see how you're feeling, how you're doing, what basically can be better, any issues popping up for you, that kind of a thing. And again, to the extent kind of that you've got a good AI policy built into this thing and people understand potentially where some of this information may go, there is often a human who just kind of keeps tabs on things to say, look, are there any kind of hotspots, any major red flags popping up we ought to know about? And minimally, otherwise, it just takes care of all the basics. So I think that's immediately where it could go. Will it ever take over entirely HR folks? No, because to Max's point rather, around critical thinking, to take the massive amount of data, strategic data that will be sucked up from the use of AI tools and so forth, and then interpret that as potential directions, for instance, that a company ought to go or ought to think about minimally. That's going to still take some human interaction. There will not be a bot, created that says, it's okay, we got this. We're going to just do all of the thinking and all of the feeling and all of the, kind of inception and all of the intuition. We're just going to take that over and we don't need an HR department anymore. You can definitely get rid of the lower layers for sure and hand that to a bot, which is a huge relief for everybody. But that's where I would say it would go.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm not sure anyone want to add anything here, or should we move on?
I would just add to that you can tell AI what you want, what your desire is, because it's got no desires or motivation of its own. And in 10 years' time, it'll have enough data to work out these paths will give you those desires, those by pods, I mean processes. These do this people process that way, do that process that way, it'll give it to you. And marketing, by the way, and finance. The thing that it won't have is the desires. So if you change your desire of what you want from HR, you've then got to go back to the HR, to the AI and say, I'm changing my desire. If we get to the point where we program AI and then it takes away the ability for us to change it, then that's when the human, then you need to read a guy called Isaac Asimov, wrote some great material on this subject. But ostensibly, I can foresee a world where humans are really minimized. And we've got to be careful. That's a human choice, whether we want to let that happen or not. And I think that a lot of people will be split.
Okay, thank you very much for both of you there. Lital, maybe you can take this one, talking about from Strahinya. How are you managing cost and benefit ratio when choosing and suggesting an AI tool?
Yeah, I think that the approach to that is to look at where is the pain point, like where is the area that you need the solution, and kind of go and do a research and see what the market can offer you and what are the prices. I can say from my perspective that myself and my team, we are interviewing a lot of people. We are spending a lot of time doing the screens, talking to people, writing the notes, and then sending the notes to our customers, and it made sense for me to kind of invest in tool that will save time. So I think it's about kind of looking where is the pain point, doing the research and finding the tool that answer your problem. Another tool that we use is like a search tool that helps us better that helps us to find people over the internet, and it's again, this is like an area that was painful for us as a talent acquisition team to find the people, so it made sense for us to invest in those tools. Yeah.
I will jump to our last one because we're just approaching the hour mark right now, so it's not really a question, but maybe a comment on to finish with. If you haven't touched on evaluation and performance, achievement, impact measurement, and how AI can help HR leaders, so talking about these areas here, maybe Max, you want to take the lead on this one because we haven't given you one to lead off
on performance measurement,
on performance, achievement, impact measurement, and how AI can help leadership.
Well, I mean, it's great for writing performance reviews if you put in the information. Unfortunately, they all sound the same, and research is really clear that employees do not like getting performance reviews that sound like they've been pre-written. Even if you change the parameters of the performance review, it's like going on a date, you know, and somebody says, how are you? What are your hobbies? What would you like to do with that? You know, it's mechanical and it doesn't work well. And so there's a huge debate at the moment as to whether performance reviews and generally manager-leader interaction will be automated. Jeff and I are kind of old, and so we come from a school where we grew up with human interaction. However, if you are a lobster and you were born in the pot with cold water and it was warmed up really slowly, and the only interaction you know is kind of machine interaction when it comes to work, you might think that that's the norm. And I saw something about that this morning, that somebody said, you know, that modern generations, I don't know if you saw that story on TikTok about that woman who recorded her exit interview when she resigned. It's a good story. And you know, I listened to it on the business news on BBC World this morning, and she said, yeah, it's kind of the norm of what, you know, aren't you worried about having your whole life out there on the internet? You can't hide it and blah, blah, blah. And she said, you know, I grew up with my whole life on the internet to start with. We're kind of used to it. It's your generation that's not used to having everything about you. I'm not saying it's a good thing to have everything about you out there, but it's a question. So we may find that, you know, older generations may not be mad about performance reviews being delivered in that way and may want the personal stuff, but I have a feeling we're a dying breed.
I can't say I've ever heard the lobster in the boiling water metaphor.
And if you warm it up
It's
slowly, it doesn't notice that it's being boiled.
You don't realize that you're boiling to death. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's loads of us as well. I've just been getting the knife to the back of the head, basically, as well. So, okay, we are at time. We're a little bit over time. So I want to take this opportunity to first of all thank all of you who joined us for today's webinar. As I mentioned a couple of times, we're receiving this webinar recording tomorrow, as well as the credentials for our panelists. So I'd like to thank now. So thank you very much, Jeff, Max, and Lital, for your insights. I'm not sure if any of you want to mention anything about what you're going on, what you've got going on before we finish things up. You can use this opportunity to anything to drop here or name drop. No, okay,
I'm happy.
No worries.
No, all good.
Okay, good. All right. So once again, thank you everyone for joining. And yes, we'll see you at the next webinar in a little while. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Justin.
Thank you, mate.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Nice.